How are you doing?
Good, good. It's just the weather here is cold.
Okay, you carry and you get ready, no problem.
Yeah, it has been for 3 days below zero, and I think another 2 days.
Okay, okay.
So other than that, is everything is good.
I'm sorry, it is odd time, I think, for you.
10:30,
Oh, 10, that, okay. Okay,
10:30 in the evening. Yeah,
yeah.
at night. So it's okay. I'm used to do this because I do it with other locations.
Yes.
So. Like with Singapore, Middle East. It's the uh, other side of the world. So
Okay. Abdus is in touch with you?
YouTube link not YouTube 9 is waiting, you are not activated, no?
आवाज आएगी नहीं है ना साउंड तो है
काटेंगे तो आपका आवाज उधर जाएगा।
Is suppose joined.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, we'll start. Just a lot of students are joining. That's why in 1 or 2 minutes we'll wait and we'll start.
Half century crossed and beauty also. Beauty also half century crossed.
Oh. On 30. Shall we? Huh? Shall we start?
ಒಂದು ಮಾತ್ರ ಬ್ರೌನ್ ಮತ್ತೆ ಅದಾದ್ರೆ
ಅದು ಬಿಡು ಅದು ಬಾಡ இந்த நீர்ನ குடி
நான் சொல்றதே புரிஞ்சுக்க மாட்டேங்கிற சர்தார். அங்க அவ்வளவு இருக்கு, தேவையே இல்லை அந்த பக்கம். அங்க பாருங்க,
Hello. Excuse me, all the students are requested to mute your mics. All the students are requested to mute your mics. we're just going to start actually. All the students are requested to mute your mics. Prof, shall we start?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Good morning to all. First of all, I would like to actually thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Gurmeet Singh, who is inspirational and guiding force and directing us to conduct these actually webinar series, and respected deans, heads of the department, respected students, particularly all the students who are doing their courses through distance mode, and other participants actually who are on the webinar. A very on behalf of my behalf and on behalf of the Director of Distance Education and Pondicherry University, you're all welcome to this webinar series on knowledge transfer in distance education can the past inform the future by Professor Suliman Hawamdeh. I'll give you a brief background about the Dde Director of Distance Education and Webinar Series. The Distance Education was established in the year 1995 for offering the PG and UG program. And now the Dde is offering 8 UG programs, 4 PG programs. And all these programs are actually approved by the All Indian Council of Technical Education and actually dubbed UGC. On the occasion of Silver Jubilee, the Director of Distance Education, Pondicherry University, is organizing a series of lectures from distinguished academicians, administrators, management gurus, professionals on various topics ranging from the motivation to self-orientation skills, leadership skills, and various other areas. Most of these lectures are arranged on Saturdays and Fridays, but because of the convenience of these distinguished speakers. So
There's a literature survey that was done in 1975 that shows about 700 references or 700 publications that reference the inequality and information poverty, sort of a term that start to come or appear, and people start to talk about it as a result of computerization and automation. Next slide, please. And as far as terminology concerns, so we gonna use a lot of terminology, and you kind of come across a lot of these terms that have been used to talk about probably the same thing or similar things, which is sort of things like information equity, inequality, knowledge information gap, knowledge gap, information divide, information disparity, information rich, information poor, digital haves and digital have-nots, and of course the more popular or common term, the digital divide. Next. So just to differentiate between the term information equity versus information equality, and it is easy to confuse these terms, but one sort of includes the others. When we talk about equality, is that everybody has the same, given the same or equal opportunity, given the same resource. So if we talk about access to the library, then every student have the right to have access to the library and to the databases. But if we talk about information equity, we talk about more than access, because access to internet or access to the library, access to database, given equal access, does not cater for the specific needs of different community. So if you have different ethnic groups or different needs, for example, handicaps or other people with disability and so on, and you're talking about their special need where you have to provide more than just equal access. So, for example, in distance education, we can talk about a given computer admitted to the program to enroll in the program as an equal treatment. But then once you're within the program, we look at information equity, which will go up one level to look at what are the needs of these students to actually be able to do distance learning. So it's easy to say we give this equal treatment to everybody, but that's not equity, that would be quality. Next page. Next slide. Are you there? Okay, I think we're moving too much. Okay, so in terms of equity, we talk about this slide is not very clear, but it just gives you an idea of what percentages of the world population have actually access to the internet. We still have is about half of the world population have no access to electricity and the internet. So in terms of equity, we're still a long way to go to be able to provide at least even equal access. Not to say if some people have 5G or telephone connection or whatever. And that's where it makes an issue for distance learning, that we normally do not look at equity issues that much. Next. Again, this is another slide that shows that most of the offline population lives in least developed countries, which means that a lot of people still do not have access, and mainly in developed countries. Next. And this is, again, shows the internet usage. What is interesting here is we are improving. This slide shows you the sort of access 2005 to 2019, and it should be continue to go up steadily, but we're still a long way to be able to provide internet access to the rest of the population. Next. So equity and equality in distance education, as I said, is we can guarantee that every student will have a seat admitted to the program based on merit. So I would say if everybody meets the merit admission, they'll get admitted to the program, no problem. That's a fair treatment, that's equality. But But then we need to look further to equity and say, what do we need to provide students with? We need to provide them with computers. We need to provide them with internet access. We need to make sure they have the resources they need to succeed in their education. So when we're looking at information equity, we're not looking at hardware, software, but we're looking at the type of resources, the type of information that is needed to make education happen in an environment which is not the same as face-to-face. So in a face-to-face environment, you might sometimes get the resources directly from the professor. So in a lot of cases, if the professor, and we used to do that when we go face-to-face class, if we can photostat, we can photocopy articles and give them to the students. We could photocopy a chapter under the copyright, whatever copyright allows you to do, and we can provide that to the students in the class. In the distance education environment, we're more restricted. We're not able to do that. And interestingly, one of the things that I was sort of give as an example of restrictive nature of the digital world is that before, when you used to go to the academic library, say you're in a town with a good university and have a very good library, everybody in the town or coming from anywhere will be able to walk into the library and use the books and journals and so on. Once increasingly those books and journals become digital and become on the computer with a password protected and user ID, we start to see that only students and faculty can have access. So no longer can anybody come and walk in and use the resources. And that's one dimension. The other dimension, which is pretty problematic, is that when the library used to buy the book or the journal and they would put it on the shelf, they own it. So basically they can use it until they decide we need to get rid of it because it's obsolete or replaced or whatever. But today, most of the digital resources are licensed. And once you stop subscription, you lose that access to the material. So you actually do not own the material anymore. So think about it. This is a problematic because you paid actually for the resource, but you don't own it anymore. The publisher owns it and licenses it. And many now try to argue or champion the open access as an alternative for equity. So open access does provide a way where you make the material open, accessible, and I gave example of the information research, which is the first journal ever existed in electronic form, is founded by Professor Tom Wilson in Sheffield University. And he created the journal in 1995. I became an editor on the journal around 1997. And then I got off the editorial board when I moved to the US. So I was representing AGM as a regional editor on the journal. And then I went to the US and then no longer on the editorial board. If you go back to the journal, for example, and check whether I ever served on the journal, you don't find that information because it's an electronic journal, and once you change the information, there is no backup to that information, which meant is that all that information is lost. So the only way I can prove that I was an editor on that journal, which is an open access journal, if I go back to the Wayback Machine, which is the Internet Archive. So when I search the Internet Archive, I can find the page and I can say, hey, I was an editor, here is a proof of it. But if I go to the journal website, there is no evidence that I ever exist. And that's why, because the electronic journal never had a backup system in place. So now we don't have backup systems for a lot of electronic material that we publish. And if the publisher go out of business and decide not to maintain the database, all that electronic material will disappear. So we have a dilemma here in a sense of comes back to the issue of equity and who is in charge of this information that we sort of shifted increasingly we are shifting toward that. Next. So I looked up some of the articles that sort of talks about what I'm interested in is to see what are the studies that focus on information equity and how these studies have become more and more important. The issue become more important that there's more studies being carried out. And as you see here, there is reported by 2000, there was reported about 14,000 items on digital divide, related to digital divide. And as I said, digital divide, information equity, and so on are terms that use to describe the same thing. But as digital divide is sort of a common terminology that is used in other disciplines, so there were increased in the number of, as you saw earlier, there was about 700. Now by the 90s, by 2000, that number increased to 14,000, which is not only in our discipline, information, library information science discipline, but also in other disciplines as well. In our discipline, which is sort of information study, we had a focus on equity by some of the researchers in the information seeking behavior and information needs. So we have the information behavior discipline of our field that looks at how people use information, where do they go to look for information, and what makes them look for information. So those are sort of the aspects of information behavior and information need. And one of the people who sort of zoomed on this area is Chapman, 1996. And she looked at what she terms as a small world, which basically looking at sort of the people who are not studied or less studied by other people, sort of the normal people. Where do they go to look for information? How do they look for it? Where do they look? And sort of highlighted that there is a gap, and that gap created mostly because if you don't have access to information, sometimes you cannot do much things. And this is where the digital divide, the information equity become important, because if you want to have a good job, you want to apply for a job overseas, or you want to get a good job, all these jobs are advertised on the internet. You have to have, say, LinkedIn account. You got to have a Facebook account. You have to have connections to be able to get those jobs, or looking for health information or other aspects of doing business and so on. And if you don't have access to the internet, you don't have access to information, for one reason or another, so you're left behind. So the study of information equity in our field happened in sort of the 90s and later on in the 2000s and continued, but mainly from information behavior point of view, not sort of still focus on one area, which is sort of what with the examples I'm going to give you later, that information equity is an issue that of sort of a national issue, not just a discipline or a field, but also at the sort of the knowledge economy aspect, the knowledge management, and the development of a country and then going sort of to the developed status, if you want to be a developed status. And also, what it means is that information is power, knowledge is power, and if you are innovating, you own the intellectual property, you generate wealth, that goes hand in hand. All right, next. Okay, these are some of the publications that I sort of published when I was actually in Singapore. And the reason I put those here is sort of to highlight that some of the work that I did back then, and I continue to work on related to information society, is largely because of the experience that I have with Singapore, a sort of a case study that I always use, that Singapore came up with this initiative to become an intelligent island, to become a knowledge economy, to transform to a developed country. So they invested in infrastructure and what is termed as the national information infrastructure, which is sort of went beyond what sort of we, as I said, in our field, we study it from sort of one angle, which is information behavior. But here is more of business-oriented, more of infrastructure, knowledge infrastructure, and innovation, and so on. So some of those publications, I put them up there, that relates to that experience, which sort of highlight some of those issues long time ago, before we even started to offer distance learning. When I was in Singapore with Dr. Ramaya working there, we didn't offer any online classes. We didn't do any distance education. I only done it when I moved to the US. And as I said earlier on, was something that viewed as not favorable. But now we see that major universities are now offering a distance education. Next. Okay, so in 2005, I was invited, based on those articles that I showed you before, somebody Googled me from the internet, and I got an email asking me to if I want to talk to them on the phone, and it was someone from the United Nations, and he said, we are holding the United Nations World Summit on the information society, and I read some of the work you did, and we would like you to come and talk about that. So at that time, there was a lot of interest in e-government, and e-government sort of at the beginning of the early stages. No one really at that time have an idea how would e-government function. What does e-government mean in a sense? How would you use e-government? So that's sort of things that they were interested in, and in line with what I did, experience that I have in Singapore, I went in and gave a talk at the United Nations World Summit in 2005. 2005. And that experience was really good because I was able to sort of see how not only individuals or universities, which is that's where we work and we interact, but also see countries looking at ways of evolving or wanted to be in the knowledge economy. And that sort of things then sort of open the question that this is an effort that cannot be done by individuals, cannot be done by just universities, but the government has to step in. The government has to put in the resources to make that happen. And in case of Singapore, the Library 2000 initiative, which has followed the IT 2000 initiative, they invested the $3 billion in the first phase, and then they put in another $2 billion and later put some more to revamp the library infrastructure, because they thought that you could not be a knowledge economy if you don't have a good information infrastructure, a knowledge infrastructure. And those resources are needed to enable people to sort of educate the population and move them along. So that was an interesting experience. Next. So when we sort of focus on information equity and that's connected back to the United Nations, and United Nations sort of viewed access to information as a basic human right. And UNESCO looked at it as from the transformation of the society. If we are transforming the society from or moving to the information and knowledge society, and we want to be from participant in that knowledge economy, then you have to provide the resources. So there's a difference between a consumer of the information society and actually a participant in the production of the information society. So that is important, because a lot of the countries, a lot of the developed countries, and now you go around and you see everybody has a phone, everybody has even they get a 5G very soon, and able to connect to the internet, able to have a Facebook account. Yes, they have access, but they're not participants. They're not the people who actually create things. They are the people who consume it. So there's a difference between a consumer and a participant in the knowledge economy. Okay. Did we lose the connection or?
What, sir? I can present, sir.
Okay, we'll wait.
I'll just do it, no problem. Somebody student, somebody fiddled actually.
Okay, we'll just.
No problem. No problem. I'm coming back. No problem. No.
Okay. Yeah. I'll just wait. Just wait for it. Yep. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so if the government has to provide that resources, then we're talking about a higher level, more at the national level, to be able to get people to create something. Then you have to provide what we call the national information infrastructure, or what is termed as an NII. And basically, NII is having the physical resources as well as the software content management and so on to enable people to participate in the knowledge economy. So moving from consumer to actual participant means that we have to put in the resources and investment to be able to make people participate in the knowledge economy and be able to create something. Next. So historically, when we look at what happened in terms of the NII initiative, the National Information Infrastructure, it started in 1978 by the French, in 1972 by the Japanese, and then French, and then the US, and then Singapore, and then other countries. So these initiatives were able to make a difference in moving, creating the infrastructure that needed to move to the knowledge economy. So in the 90s is sort of the critical time when a lot of these things happened. And I remember the Singapore 2000 initiative came around 1990, Library 2000 came around 1992, and so on. And the goal was by 2000 is to be able to have in place all the resources needed to transform the country into a knowledge economy and part of the knowledge society. So in the US, sort of different from other countries, because the US is too big and sort of the government doesn't really drive things most of the time, but the private sector that drives the thing. So it was more of a partnership between the government and, so the government sort of played the role of facilitating the development, and then things follow. But for a small country like Singapore, for example, you have to have the government behind to make that happens. And then that's what they did. Next. So these are the principles of the NII. So if you kind of think, what is NII and what it's supposed to do? So these are the type of thing that need to be in place. And if you look at privacy and security, which is, we talk a lot about in these days about cyber warfare, we talk about cyber security, we talk about all these things, because they're critical to, the more we go online, the more we put our information online, the more we are vulnerable to attacks and stolen ID and all that stuff. So it is very easy to go to a developed country, a developing country, and steal their information because their internet is not secure, infrastructure is not secure. So you will find a lot of times there is more problems with using internet and payment and all this with developing countries than with developed countries. And that's largely because the infrastructure is not in place. And that is important. But the one that is more important, which is sort of, I think myself and Dr. Ramaya went it through when we were in Singapore, is this ability to protect intellectual property to enable innovation to happen. So for example, Singapore used to be the place where you can buy pirated software. You can just walk into the shopping center and buy any software you want. You just make a copy, give it to you. And then they realized that if we're moving to the knowledge economy, if we want to be participant of the creation, not just the consumer, then we have to crack down on piracy. And therefore, we cannot be a knowledge economy if we don't respect and protect intellectual capital. So basically promoting and protecting competition is critical to the information infrastructure and for making those things happen. So that sort of things, because if you copy other people copy you, then you're not protecting it, you're not making money, you're not part of the innovation and the intellectual property. Okay, so going back to where our profession is, where our field is, as far as we see ourselves fit into all this. So if you look at the traditional model of representing sort of the data, information, and knowledge, and then you got somewhere wisdom, in sort of the pyramid or the can you yeah, okay.
Hello, somebody is actually on the mic. Can you please note, because it is interrupting the lecture. Dear students, can you please, all of you, to mute your mics?
Yeah, probably sometimes accidentally hit it and they're not realizing it, so I gotta remind them. That's okay. So as far as our profession concerns, so sort of, a lot of people ask the questions, how is the profession evolving? Along with that, what do we need as an information professional? What is our role? What do we need to be part of the information infrastructure? And what is our contribution to that? And sort of what we see in the evolution of the profession and the sort of now about 20, 30 years ago, we only talk about library science. So when I went to do my master degree, I went and did master in University of Michigan, and they were only offering Master of Science in library science. So you actually do not have information science option. You don't have data science option. You didn't have knowledge management option. So now we have, if you go to a lot of the schools, you have a data science, you have a knowledge management, you have information science, you have information management, you have library science, archives, and so on. So how these things fit together, and how do we build design programs and build competencies if we cannot relate those things together? So it's kind of like if we're moving toward the knowledge economy, we're building infrastructure, we're in the knowledge economy, we want to be part of it. So how do we design programs and build competencies for our students, like all of you? How do we train you? What do we need to do to train you to be able to fit into the information and knowledge society? And also we want you to go out and compete with other professions, computer science, communication, business, MIS, all these people you will be competing with them, because increasingly, whether we like it or not, our traditional job is changing. So the traditional library job is changing. I know it's changing slower in certain countries than the other, and you might think, well, certain countries going to take long time to change, but it's actually accelerating faster than we think, because, as I said, we didn't have to have a lot of things to enable people to access Facebook. So a lot of people now have a phone, have a cellular phone, they have a Facebook on it, they are connected, They are part of the web, part of the knowledge economy, but as a consumer, they're not competing for a job. When we educate our students, we have the task and the challenge in most of information science and library science school is to educate people who will be able to go out and compete and get a job. So the key, how do we relate information science, library science, and data science, and knowledge management together? And in my view, the way to do that is to look at the bigger picture, which is, let's call it the knowledge management, broader concept, but not to confuse it with sort of, oh, that's another field that we don't have to be there. It's not our business. If you want to be a knowledge manager, you do knowledge management. I'm going to be a librarian. I'm just going to do library. The problem is that you're actually not insulated. You're not separate. You're actually dealing with the issues. And one of the issues that when we added data science, and this is important, I'm sort of working on a book chapter now, try to illustrate the problem, is that in the past, before we have data science, we played with those terms, data, information, and knowledge, and we sort of define them the way we want and the way we like, in another word. But now with data science, we sort of start questioning, okay, where is data fits? Where is knowledge fit? Where is information fit? And increasingly we're getting into realizing that information and knowledge is inseparable entities. You have to have one for the other to exist. So basically you cannot have information without knowledge. You cannot have knowledge without information. So think about it in a sense that really knowledge management and information science and data science might not be separate, might not be, they actually have to coexist. To some extent, you could say data science is about data, it's about processing, but it's also about knowledge discovery. Because what we do with data analytics, what we do with data mining is we're trying to do knowledge discovery. And in order to do discovery, we pass information and sort of over a sudden, whoa, can we go from data to knowledge without going into information? And that's what makes it now interesting, that these terms are not hierarchical and you cannot represent them by DIKW, which is the knowledge, DIKW, data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. It's not that hierarchical, it's not that sort of linear, it's more complex. So I put them as just to illustrate, as three different circles, and there's a lot of intersection among those three areas that then sort of give us different perspective of the interplay of data, information, and knowledge. And I see that more as emerge as the information profession at the end of the day, which is information and knowledge profession, really, because knowledge is not a separate. Knowledge management is not going to be a separate field. Information science, we use the term information science, but we'll look back and say, but information is more of an activity. It's not really an object. So what are we studying there? But again, this is something that is sort of working itself out to say that at the end of the day, we're looking at information profession, knowledge profession, data profession, maybe interrelated, and it's hard going forward to separate one from the other. So the wisdom here is, okay, if that's the case, then how do we design curriculum that enable our students to take the right courses and be able to compete for the job? Because that's the important part. What do you call yourself is not important. The important part is, can you get a job? Because you're going looking for a job. Can I get the job? That's the important part. So it's not the name. Call me whatever you want, but I want the good job that pays good money. And that's the bottom line. So, all right, let's move on to the next one. So there are trends and challenges in our field, and I just put a few ideas there that sort of over time how our field evolved. We have different conventions, different naming, we have trends, different pedagogies, different multidisciplines, multicultural, different traditions in the field, but that is also moving forward, so we're not going backward. And it's not sort of by our choice that we want to, somebody will say, well, I don't want to rename my program just because it's trending. It's not about trending. It's actually about evolution. So that's my point here, is that our field is evolving and we have no choice but to go with it. Next. Next slide. Okay, so I just put in a brief definition of knowledge management, which sort of, just to give you an idea what knowledge management is about, it's sort of an interdisciplinary field that deals with all sorts of knowledge processes and practices. And a lot of those knowledge processes and practices, they're not new. For example, some of the practices is mentoring, apprenticeship. We do all these things, organizations do all these things, and you need to have those things in any profession, whether in library science or medical or any other field. You still do all these things. And so sort of knowledge management is not restrictive to one field, it's sort of across all fields, but also it's about seeing what we call the big picture, ability to see the forest beyond the trees. And what I mean here is that also in our field, we want to be able to see beyond our discipline, which sort of somebody will say, I'm more library science than information science, or information science more than library science. There is a bigger picture that you need to look at the evolution of these fields. Next. So I put these slides just quickly to show something that we always overlook in anything we do, not just our field, but in our field, sort of interesting concept in knowledge management, which is called tragedy of the commons, which is some of the things that we do that we think it only concerns us, but it has impact on everybody. So, for example, you cannot be on the sort of things that all it matters is what right for you, and you're not concerned about other people somehow. And I give example of that. If you go to the next slide, which is the COVID, and I sort of relates this back to the fact that why COVID is spread out of control and we were not able to control it. And we had the Spanish flu that happens before, and if sort of history repeats itself, in a sense. And when I was studying the Spanish flu, it was very interesting that what happened there happened again here. So we didn't really learn much in a sense of, from knowledge management perspective, in a sort of, we didn't sort of take the measures that people back in Spanish flu failed to take and resulted in sort of the same thing. But it is largely, the reason I put the tragedy of the commons before, because largely what happened is that there are people who are selfish, or people who looked at what is good for them over the public good, which has resulted to what happened in that. So I put this as kind of sort of comparison to what happens in our field, is the sort of this notion that this is sort of data science is not mine, or I'm not bothered about it. Knowledge management is some foreign concept and so on. But it's pretty much an idea that you cannot be so zoomed into what is just good for you and ignore the rest of the things around you. Next. This is, I sort of put this just to give you an idea what data science is, and sort of the intersection between data science and data analytics, which sort of the middle one is about the knowledge discovery. Sort of goes back to data science, data analytics, knowledge discovery. So sort of that area there. So the question is, okay, where do we fit information? And that brings back the model that I put, diagram I put back to put it in perspective and see how those concepts and three different areas relate to each other. Next. I leave you with this sort of quote from Albert Einstein. Said, the problems we have created in the world today will not be solved by the level of thinking that created them. So in a sense, we have to be innovative and sort of open-minded and be able to, willing to change, willing to be able to see the other side, and again, see the big picture and connectiveness of the interconnectedness of the system. Because if you don't look at sometimes a small part of the body can actually, if you don't take care of it, can kill the whole body. So you have to be very careful of every component of the system to be able for the whole system to work. Next. All right, so I'll leave you here, and if you have any question, I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, dear students, any questions? Now it is actually time for the question answers. The prof will be able to address to you questions one by one. Actually, you can identify yourself and actually give your question. Then one by one, we will be able to handle it. Some are there in the chat box. We will look into that, but some live also. There is one question actually from Rahul Singh. He says, these days information and knowledge is available through multiple digital media, but quality is missing. And they are not actually contemporary to today, and hence actually causing information fatigue or digital blindness. How do you cope up with it?
Yes, good question. And this is something that I didn't have time to talk about, which is the big issue today, which is we're working on something. We got just a paper published by two of my students. And can you please mute your Okay, thank you. We have a paper published by two of my PhD students, and it is about social noise on social media and related to fake news. So the issue is it, yeah, what you said is correct, and that is the quality part of the information is not much you can do about it if it is, because the internet and the sort of the digital world is an open system. Anybody can go up and put something there. Doesn't go through editorials.
सर हेलो हाँ गुड मॉर्निंग सर मैं AK सिंह बोल रहा हूँ फ्रॉम इंडिया
Yes.
Are you listening my voice or otherwise sir
Yes, there was noise coming from somebody, so
you are not getting my voice. Hello,
yes,
are you listening sir to me? There is
no,
a question sir, there is a question that
yes.
That equity is not in the hand of जो है individual, those who is as a learner, whereas जो है equality is the right of individual, but how the equity which is related with the sources, with the resources, that is the part of the government, unless the government provides it so, otherwise the individual cannot have the access to the equity. Does it so?
Okay, so you cannot throw in the three different terms. So we have equity, we have equality, and we have quality. So equity is sort of giving people the things they need. Quality is giving them equal access. But quality is the quality of the material you're providing. Whether, for example, that information is vetted, edited, fake information, it's social noise. A lot of information generated over the internet is actually generated by social noise. People reacting to something because for various reasons. So if you have people generating information for political reasons or doing it for promote themselves and so on. So that information then is a problem with the quality, because it is, if somebody promoting themselves, they're going to lie. What can you do about that? Not much you can do, right? So nobody can control that. What we're trying to do, and we're working on, is can we differentiate social noise information from deliberate misinformation or disinformation, and ability to filter that information. So that's a big issue. It's a major problem happening right now with information quality. If you follow up the Facebook faced challenges lately, the issues and fake misinformation, and actually their shares dropped by half because of that problem. So this is a big problem that is being worked on, and it is also part of what we call it cyber warfare. You know, it is people can put up information for political reasons that is manipulated and fake. So the challenge is not to fix it, but the challenge is to be able to identify it, to be able to tag it and label it, for people to know that this is either fake or generated for various reasons, and so on. So this is a bigger problem. It is very hard for any government to actually fix it. What the government does, and that's what we talked about, is to provide the infrastructure, the resources that people need to participate in the knowledge economy. So they're not only consumer of it, but actually sort of participant that generate, not just generate information, but also generate wealth. So, for example, if say somebody in India publish a journal, open access journal, they'll be able to make money out of that, because that's the journal that you can control and you can edit, and you can have a highly expertise that make sure that the quality is there. And by doing that, you can be part of the knowledge economy, because now you are generating wealth during having that journal. So in order for that to happen, people in India, they need a sound and a good infrastructure to be able to do that, to be able to create a journal that attracts high quality publication, and then be able to sell it and generate wealth. So that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, any more questions, please?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mani.
Thank you for insightful lecture, and we got so much information from this your in-depth lecture. Sir, my question is regarding the application of knowledge. Now, this is true that in the 21st century, the knowledge is in abundance, right? If you look at for 25 years, the access to knowledge was very much limited, but through social media, electronic media, print media, and various other sources, now the information is very much available. So my question is, has the easy access of information really increased the quality of life, the innovation, the level of democracy, or in the same proportion or not?
Good question. Yes, data is abundance. I put it that way. I put it as sort of my view of this, that everything really on the internet or in a library or somewhere is not more than data. Information happens when somebody goes and read it. Somebody gets online and read, and then that transforms into information. And knowledge is less, because knowledge is when you create something based on that information. So you take data and you digest it and you understand it, and now you say, I'm going to create a product. I'm going to create an innovation. And that's when knowledge becomes into place, because now you're actually making an action, taking a decision that translates into a knowledge and valuable knowledge. And that's why knowledge is power, because whoever controls the knowledge control the wealth and control the power. And you can see that at the interplay of the word economy. What is the largest word economy? What's the most powerful economy? And you ask why, and the answer is simple: because they control innovation, they control research, they control information, and so on. And you can find, okay, where all these quality publication comes from. And you can say, okay, so we base my library, for example, subscribe to this journal that charge us $1,000 a year. So the question you can ask, where this $20,000 goes to, which part of the world, which country. And that's where you can see that knowledge is power, knowledge is wealth also. And that's the issue. Now, access to information does not, unfortunately, translate into democracy. It does not translate into equality. Because as I said, you know, there's a difference between a participant in the knowledge economy and a consumer of the knowledge economy. So unfortunately, a lot of people around the world are merely consumer of it. We can go in, we can look at it, we can, you know, play with it, create a free web page, do that, but we're not generating anything. We're not creating it. We're not even influencing the thinking of the people in my town or my community, because everybody's just consuming it and nobody actually creating anything. The knowledge creation starts by, I am looking at you and say, wow, you created a successful company. I want to do the same thing. I want to be successful like you. But I am living next to you. So we're both in the same street. We live in the same town. And now we're competing. Now we're creating wealth. Now we are part of the knowledge economy. Now we are creating democracy, because by you generating wealth and having a company and busy with generating wealth and not paying attention to other things, now you are part of the democracy. Then your town have a respect for you, and they will try to do everything possible to keep you in the town, because they value your knowledge, they value your contribution, they value the money that you bring to your town. That is democracy. That is citizenship. And that's how our thinking about democracy. It's not about, you know, one day we have an election and the second day we are cancel it. That's not democracy. So yes, in order to be part of, truly part of, I mean, Ramaya lived in Singapore, and Dr. Ramaya, and he can tell you how that country function, because they not really don't have for politics. And most Singaporeans don't really have time because they're working, they're making money, they're busy, they're not interested in what the government do or doesn't do, or, you know, because that's what, you know, knowledge economy is. Yes, it's important to have institution, but then if Singapore lose that touch on sort of the ability of the institution to function in a sort of systematic way, then they cannot function. They will actually collapse. And that's sort of the differentiation, is that you gotta create a society that actually creates something, and then turn around and say, I want to protect what I create. So basically, your community will try to protect what you did, because the community has interest in it. Your town will have interest. Then your government has interest in protecting your rights. And that's how democracy evolved, because everybody is protecting everybody else's achievement, basically. And that's what makes it interesting. So that's how I view the democratic systems in the West to a large extent, because it's protected by itself, by its creation. You don't want, for example, the people who create Boeing or, Airbus or something to be not protected. Those important innovations, important product, wealth generation, that governments will have to protect them and do everything to make sure they continue to function and be productive. So that's what I mean. It's like, you know, in any country in the world, I guess democracy comes after being a participant of the progress, put it that way. So it could be agricultural community and doing very well. That is also possible, because if they are, applying technology to agriculture and making product and services and generating wealth. So it's not, what I mean here is not about technology. It's about development.
Yeah, sir, only comment I would like to make here, that knowledge is power only when we apply it. For example, one of the hypotheses is that as we get more and more knowledge, as the technology increases, the democracy will flourish. For example, take the case of China. Now, China has now access to knowledge and information. People are well informed now, but still the quality of democracy has not increased in China. Because I believe that the knowledge alone will not increase the level of democracy. What is required is the courage, right? So still there's a gap between is that access to knowledge and its implementation, and the bridge is the courage. If you have the courage to utilize the knowledge, then only we can move on.
Yes and no. So China is a good example, but China has a long way to go. So China has made a lot of progress and developed, and China is protecting those development that they do. So they progress, they develop, they're protecting it. But China has a long way to go, so it's not yet there. I mean, they're making progress, but not yet to the point where people in China are all participating and forcing things to happen. So basically, cannot be a small group of people to change the whole society. You need a participation from bigger group of people for that to happen. And as a result, the institution will evolve along the way. As I said, it's like, the strength of institutions. I mean, take the US as an example. The US is more controlled by institutions, not by individuals. So the system works. It's not there. And the system works because there is bigger participation of the society in the system. So even if somebody tried to change the system or alter it, they cannot, because those institutions are very powerful. And that's what differentiates other countries where either it is, not fully fledged democracy yet, because it's still really long way to go. And China is a good example. There's still a long way to go in that sense.
Yes, Prof. There is a question from Sudarshan Rao. When large amount of scholarly information still is not in the digital form, having copyright implications and language barriers, is it possible for democratization of information and knowledge across national boundaries?
All right. So that's sort of probably affect a lot of the ethnic group, might be certain languages, certain more probably to do with developed countries, which is sort of that's a good question. But I think that it does affect. It is important, but it goes back to resources. So the issue become resources and ability to convert that material that is not in digital form, and probably to be able to translate that into multiple languages. And that's a resources issue. It's not really a barrier. It's not a technology barrier. It's not an issue of democratization of information, but it's a resource issue, because we have a lot of people in, for example, at UNT, where I am, and they're doing research on languages in India, and they're able to get money from the university here to actually build archives to some of the languages in India that facing distinction or very hard to get access to. So they through this money, they're actually doing documentation and creating archives. So they should become a lot of it resources rather than anything else. At least how I view it is more of resource because multiple languages you can always translate. And if that resource is available to translate it, it does happen.
There's one more question actually. What is the status of information for all of Ifla or Unesco in democratization of information? How far it achieved its objective?
Okay, so information for all, it depends on what information we're talking about. There is no free information. That's something we have to set up the basic issue. Because when you say information for all, it's an easy statement, and it's like a goal or a wish to have that. But the reality is, if you go out on internet and you use Facebook, they're not letting you out there for free. They're actually there because you buy something you see on the ad, and they're selling you something. They could be also selling you ideology that you're not aware of. So, for example, some of the advertisement not necessarily selling you handbags, but they can be selling you a religion without you knowing. They can be selling you a political issue without knowing. So, in another word, your participation on Facebook is not a democratization. It's not a free. It's actually you are paying for it, but it's not paying subscription. You're paying by being there and exposed to all that information. So there are people out there willing to, pay big ads that influence people's opinion, and because they have a mission, and that is not, again, goes back to free. Libraries traditionally offer, especially public libraries, offer free information to the public, but they're not free because they're funded by taxpayer money. So they have to pay tax for the city or the government to give the library money to allow you to access information. So to me, there is really nothing for free. Everything is paid for. Somebody paid for somehow. And therefore, that's just, to me, that's just a slogan, information for all.
Any more questions, please? Maybe probably the last one.
So somebody put, why is it so knowledge is more beneficial than practical experience? Okay, so knowledge, we can separate knowledge from practical experience, because experience is a skill, is a competency that you build by doing something, by being there. And for humans, which is different from computers, we smell, we sense, we touch. Computers cannot do that. So that's why we have an advantage over computers, the way we build competencies and experiences. Knowledge is merely an action, because knowledge is you understand something, you act on it, and you build a product and you create a patent or you create a product out of the knowledge that you know. So it's a form of an action. So it's not really stored anywhere. It is not something that you put it in a database and you record it back. For example, take if you know a friend and the friend went away for a long time and you forget totally about that friend. And then somebody passed by and reminded you of that friend. You remember that friend because there is some similarity that prompted you to remember that friend, which is basically without that action, that memory wouldn't have come back to you. And I guess in the way we store things, I think we store them in a form of skills and competencies. That's why we have somebody better than the other. No, we're not all equal in the things we do. And a lot of those skills, we cannot even learn them by reading. We cannot just read a book and jump into the board. You need a training, otherwise you'll sink. Riding a bicycle, you need somebody to hold you to be able to master the skill of riding a bicycle. So to me, wisdom and experience and insights are some put together, which is the practical experience, which is the competency, the skills that we build over time, and we vary from one person to another. But our ability to translate information, data, and experience into knowledge is what innovation and knowledge generation and the power that we talk about. When we say knowledge is power, and we talked about knowledge sharing, and people don't want to, they hoard their knowledge and they don't want to share it largely because they have that capability to do it. They have the experience, the insights, the training that they can do something not everybody can do. And then that's what we mean by knowledge is power.
So I think now it is very late for the professor. Actually, it is already midnight in US, and
that's okay. I stay late lately because we work from home during COVID. So
any more questions? The last one.
No? Okay.
Okay. In that case, I think we'll wind up. Now, actually, I would like to thank Professor Suliman actually for giving a very stimulated talk, and which actually all our students got benefited. And this actually weekly one lecture we are organizing this. And this week actually we have two. Tomorrow we have one more lecture. Professor from Chicago, Illinois University is going to talk. And this lecture, of course, is though I was very sorry a little bit because of technical problem. There was a snack and then we started a bit late. But it went on well, and it took even long time to cover all the issues, and he has actually answered all the questions raised by the participants. And I would like to thank him on behalf of the Directorate of Distance Education and from the Pondicherry University. So we have actually a customary of actually giving a token of actually a presentation since it is he has taken time, and we would like to actually all the token which we will be sending to the professor by actually the post. Prof.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I'm very glad to be able to do this.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, thank you very much. Yeah, and now it is my my colleague actually will be giving a officially word of thanks He is actually Commander Rajkumar, who is also Deputy Registrar of this university, who is working in the department, in the Directorate of Distance Education, will be giving a word of thanks.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, one and all. I hope, Professor, I am audible.
Thank you. Yeah, everything is good.
Yeah, and it's 30 minutes past midnight at US. So thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much to all who are a part of this webinar. And it's my privilege and honor to present a vote of thanks on behalf of the Directorate of Distance Education, Pondicherry University. First of all, I'd like to extend my heartfelt thanks to the respected speaker of this event, Professor Suliman Hawamdeh from College of Information, University of North Texas, for taking out from his time from his busy schedule, not only busy schedule, and giving his consent for delivering a talk on the occasion of this webinar at such a short notice. One thing which Professor had mentioned here, which I would like to quote: equality in distance education means that every student has equal right to be admitted and given the same opportunity to enroll. So I hope all the students who are present here in this webinar must be well motivated enough that why we should also pursue the course through distance education. Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much, sir. I would also take this opportunity to thank Professor Gurmeet Singh, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Pondicherry University, for his constant support and guidance and always enlightening us with his knowledge, without which this webinar would not have been possible. Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor, sir. In addition, I would also like to thank the students, faculty members, officers and staff, not only for participating, but also for their valuable support throughout. Last but not the least, I would like to thank the Computer Center of the University and entire staff of DDE for putting this event live through the online platform. Although some glitches are there, as Director mentioned, however, we overcome within no time. At last, I thank each and every one of you for your gracious presence for this webinar, and also in advance for the series of webinars in the near future. The next one scheduled right away tomorrow in the evening at 7 p.m. In case I have missed out anyone, my apologies in advance for the same. Thank you, sir.
Now you can disseminate the information, particularly the students who missed this talk. The recorded talk is available on our website and also in our YouTube channel, of course. So you have the privilege of actually viewing that talk. So no need to worry, because try to actually participate in that. You will be able to have the chance of actually interacting with the world level experts, academicians. So once again, I would like to thank all the students and other participants actually who took part actually in this webinar. And thank you once again. Tomorrow we have a webinar at afternoon 7 p.m. That is by another expert from Illinois University of Technology from Chicago, and he will be talking about disruptive technology. Thank you very much. Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.